One. Okay, I'm going to call this regular meeting of the Board of Finance to order for Tuesday, September 15th. Welcome, everyone. First item up for the agenda is to discuss and take action on the bond appropriation and authorization for sewer improvements. Jennifer?
So the resolution you have appropriates and authorizes bonding of $2,340,000. Ed Gentile's here. He can give you more specifics about the project and how he arrived at that number. But one thing is we have received an award for the Clean Water Fund grant. So the estimated, if we receive the full amount of the grant, is up to $373,697. So we would really finance about $1,965,000 if we receive that grant. And the debt service, estimated debt service on that, which would be paid by the sewer ratepayers, is about $122,000 per year.
And that's all reflected in this bond authorization?
Yeah, it's
the
the estimates on the pro forma after the resolution.
Got it, okay. Ed, further comments? Doug, welcome, nice to see you, sir.
Nice to see you all again. I'll try to keep it brief, but this is coming in front of you for the first time, so I want to make sure you have some of the details that I think are important as we move forward. The clean water grant that Jennifer had referred to was an application put forth by our consultant doing what we call an I&I study. It's infiltration and inflow into our sanitary sewer systems underground. So what we had done back in October of 2019 is we had hired a consultant. They put together this application. We submitted it to the state. We have approval of the scope of work. What we don't have is the funds in the account to draw down from. And right now I understand it's at the governor's level and it still needs to be funded. It was part of the capital improvements or capital funding that he needed to move around. They haven't done it yet. So we've been waiting for almost now, I'd say about 10 months for it to happen. They do say eventually it will happen, so we're hopeful that we're going to get the 55%. But my bond request, though, anticipated maybe not getting any. So I had to prepare for the worst case. But moving forward, this is something that the Sewer Commission had asked us to do a couple of years ago, start doing the study, start improving our infrastructure. So it requires some planning and investigative work, some engineering work, and then from that, getting some capital improvements recommendations from our consultant to move forward. And this is going to be a 3 or 4 phase project. So this is the first phase of probably an 8 to 10 year program to address what we consider a very serious problem. What had happened back in 2018, we did have quite a few sewer overflows. We had one major one on the Boston Post Road up across the street from Papa Joe's and Mama Carmelo's. We did spill about 700,000 gallons of raw sewage into the street, which made its way down into the catch basins, into the Stony Brook, and then out to Gorham's Pond. The other ones that we've had are much smaller of size, anywhere between 50 gallons per instance, up to 20,000 gallons of some overflow due to high rainwaters on some of the storms. And if you remember, 2018, we had quite a bit of rain that year. We had quite a bit of overflows over in the Goodwives shopping center area because of high water levels in that river. So with that all said, we're now going after, with this program, going after that sewer shed that we had the most problems with, and that's the Stony Brook shed. That's Mechanic Street, that's Goodwives River, that's Brookside, Mansfield area. A lot of wetlands up in that area. We have very older sewer lines. The infiltration gets into the pipes, through the manholes, through the joints in the pipes. So we're gonna go after that area first, and we've already studied and done quite a few of the areas, I'm sorry, with our consultant. So with that said, we have spent almost $200,000 with our consultant already. We anticipate getting some capital recommendations from them really soon. I have actually in my inbox today, I got the draft report from them from our 2 flow assessments that we've done, some 2 sub areas recently. This flow assessment, just to give you a little background, is something they do at night. They go out at night, they open the manholes between 12 midnight and 5, and these sewers should be running pretty dry. We go out during high groundwater season, so if they're running, we have issues with groundwater in our system. They identified quite a few spots that we're running significantly high. So that's going to help us target areas. This is kind of an area to kind of, a study that eliminates areas. If this is good, we don't focus there. We start to focus on the areas where we have high groundwater flows. We did put 9 meters in throughout town or throughout the Stony Brook area. We go back and we analyze during rainstorm events which ones peak instantly, and the ones that peak instantly show us inflow. That means direct pipe connections to our sanitary sewer system. And it could be some pumps from people's houses or businesses. It could be direct connections from roof leaders from little larger buildings. Back in the old days, used to tie everything together, went out to sanitary sewer. Sometimes local contractors years ago would tie catch basins from parking lots into the sanitary sewers. So these things are noticed and picked up very quickly through the metering system. So these are the things we've been doing now for the past 6 months. Like I said, I have the report now, the draft report I'm starting to look at now. So I sat down with the consultant. We came up with some raw numbers on what we think the first phase in these areas that we studied recently, what type of capital improvements we'd like to do, the magnitude of them, and then we started putting costs, recent costs that we've used and paid to do certain types of work. There's pipe cleaning and cammering that we need to do. More of the cleaning has to do with the fats, oils, and greases that coagulate inside the pipe and reduce the diameter, thus causing backups, which is what happened over the Goodwise River Shopping Center area. The camera work will identify any cracks, deficiencies in the pipes, any root intrusions, any misalignments. That allows for groundwater to get in. Once we identify those areas, we have in our first phase about 2 miles worth of pipe lining. And what pipe lining is we take an existing pipe and we basically drag through a liner. It's folded in half. We drag it all the way up the pipe. We seal one end, we blow steam in it, we seal the other, and it actually expands and hardens on the inside of that pipe. It reduces the diameter very insignificantly, but it creates a hardened plastic, which actually provides better flow conditions and structural stability in the pipe. Closes off all those joints that are misaligned, any root intrusions, any cracks in the pipes, things like that. So the pipelining will be used where we identify those areas with the cameras.
So sewer angioplasty, is that what we're talking about?
Excuse me?
Sewer angioplasty?
Pretty much. Looks like a big sausage, actually, as we put it through the pipe. The other phase is we have quite a few manholes out there, and where we found some of the water finding its way into our system is where the pipes come into the manholes.
Followed by the pound or hash sign. If you do not have a PIN, just pound or hash.
Dan, can you mute your line?
Sorry, I thought I was.
No problem. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We call this manhole lining. There's opportunities to seal the entrances of the pipes and exits of the pipes into the manholes. And we found a lot of those have loosened. There's a couple of photos and videos that we had from the flow assessments we did at night that showed basically like somebody had left the water faucet on. The water was just running into this manhole down the pipe and making its way over to Stanford. And I mentioned that final piece going to Stanford is we pay for every gallon that we send over there. We pay a hefty price every year. This past year we paid close to $3 million to treat our sewage. We did a quick analysis and I presented these numbers to the Sewer Commission. We have sent this past year to the city of Stanford over 819,000 million gallons, sorry. 819 million gallons we sent over the city of Stanford. Our water use analysis that we use for billing purposes shows that our customers only used over 400,000. that tells me that there's just under 400,000 gallons worth of infiltration and inflow that we're sending over there and treating. So almost half of our system, or half of our invoicing to the city of Stamford is clean water, basically.
How does that statistic compare to other towns? Is that a normal statistic? Is this a shockingly bad statistic?
We are not the only town with this problem. The older systems throughout, I mean, the consultant that we hired, they're doing other towns. They're in Norwalk, they did Stamford, they were in Rybrook, Mamaroneck. So these coastal areas with the older systems, the clay pipes, the vitrified clay is very, very susceptible to cracking roots. There's asbestos concrete pipes. They just disintegrate now with some of the acids that come out of the pump systems. As you pump, you create gas, hydrogen sulfide, eats right through the concrete, the asbestos concrete pipes, leaves you nothing but dirt, basically a dirt hole when you run the camera through it. We've had one of those situations up on Birch Road, on the Boston Post Road. We had to replace about 200 linear feet of pipe about a year and a half ago. So these are things that we're finding that we need to address. I don't like to find them when they start to collapse. This is one of the reasons that we brought the consultant on to do what we're doing now. I'd like to get out in front of it. I think there's going to be return on our investment. It just really depends on how well you target the areas that are causing you the most problem. And I think we picked the most active area in what we call the Stony Brook sewer shed. This whole area that comes down to the Stony Brook pump station that's right on the Post Road here next to Renshaw. That's 67% of our system runs through that pump station. So if you have any questions for me.
Question for me is, I know for the fire apparatus, for example, we have kind of a schedule and sort of know where we're going to be spending capital dollars when to replace that equipment. Is there anything similar for the sewage system, or is it much more fix it when it breaks type approach? I'm just kind of curious as to how much of this is proactive versus how much of it is reactive.
Well, when I came on board about 6 years ago, I took a look at the pump stations, the two largest ones we've had, and they had 6 pumps in there, the 75 horsepower pumps that were over 30 years old. That is the first thing I went after. It was one of those things where I wanted to beat it to the breakdown. So we replaced those first. And what we've been doing over the last 6 years is working our way down from the largest pump stations to the smallest. Now we've revamped the 5 Mile pump station. We're doing Seagate right now. We're going to look at Brookside next, Chasmar Pond, and we have 14 pump stations here in the town of Darien. So we're going to work our way down. So every year I've been putting in about $100,000 into the pump station renovation account or rehab account. And I've been working my way down that way. So I'd like to say I'm being proactive. Every once in a while, though, something does creep up and break down on us.
Right.
But for the most part, the most important things that we need to keep running here are our pumps. And then isolate some of the areas that are causing us to pump more water than we have to,
Okay.
which is our infrastructure, our piping infrastructure.
Other questions for Ed? Paul?
Can these repairs be done year-round, or are you restricted just to the fair weather months?
You try not to do it when there's a lot of higher groundwater. So, April, May, probably not a good time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
September, October, not a great time. So there's 4 months right there you really can't do a lot. We did the pipelining up on the Boston Post Road from that collapse. We did it in January when it was about 20 degrees out through the night. So it was a little difficult. So you can do it, not preferred. A lot of the stuff started to freeze up on us.
Yeah.
But we were in a hurry to get it done. We needed to get it done. So we picked the soonest time that the contractor could get out there. So you can do that type of work. Epoxy does not work well in below 45-degree temperatures, so you won't be doing it then. So there is some restrictions due to weather.
Okay.
Good deal. Other questions?
Jen, I have a question regarding the financing. Given that this was eligible for the Clean Water Fund grant, are we also eligible to borrow it all through the Clean Water Revolving Fund?
There is the potential for a Clean Water Fund loan. At the time that Ed and his consultant were looking at it, the loan rates weren't particularly favorable compared to what we could get for bonding. But the way bond counsel wrote the resolution, it could be either or. So at the time that we're ready to finance, we can look at what the rates are on the clean water loan and see if that might be an option.
And do we know, like, if this particular project would qualify for, what is it called, like the 50% subsidy or the 33% subsidy on the bonding side?
That I don't know.
I think that, like, the real benefit there is when rates are uber low, we can benefit from the state's sort of aggregated, but I think with the AAA rating, we can sometimes beat out the fund, I think, in terms of costs. The state, I think if I recall, Jen, right, the state takes and aggregates a whole bunch of little funds across, little projects like this across the state, and the state will aggregate them together and would do one big sort of
issue.
blended credit, larger deal, and it sort of shares the cost of issuance across like 30 to 40 different towns and so
There's
forth.
just
But-
sort of cost out, there's an allocation of the sort of premiums or
Yeah,
what we'd have to pay to.
and a lot of
retire.
lower rated towns participate in it, because if you take 40 triple Bs and put together, the market will think it's a double A and so forth, but since we're a natural triple A, I think we,
I was gonna say, wouldn't we want to do it ourselves if there's dilution of our credit rating if we deal with those other towns?
Right, and that's why we have it written both ways. So if it's to our advantage to do a clean water loan, we can look into that. But more than likely, and based on the rates that Ed was seeing when they first were looking into it, it would be better to go out on our own. But we have done clean water loan in the past.
and the debt service from this all gets assessed through the sewer charges, so it's not necessarily through our traditional budget, right? Everybody just pays based on.
Right, the ratepayer, it'll be part of the sewer operating budget, and the sewer operating budget will be do an annual transfer to the general fund to cover its portion of the debt service.
So is it considered like an asset-backed note, or is it?
No, it's still general obligation.
And if we're gonna be ripping up the road, is there anything else that needs to be done underneath the surface that we could do at the same time?
The process that we've talked about for rehabbing, is, pipelining is not, you don't rip up the road.
Oh,
That's probably the best part of the whole thing, the savings that you get from not having to repair asphalt, digging, a closure for roads, traffic work and things like that, traffic control, is saved by doing the pipelining. Even the epoxy on the manholes can be done without impact to the digging or any type of excavation.
Good deal, other questions? Rob?
And this,
No?
Just one question. Did I hear that the ultimate amount of the bond will be 2.3 million less whatever actual dollars we receive via the grant?
yes.
Yes.
That's right.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I heard that right. Thank you.
Yep. Rob?
I'm not sure if you can quantify this, but if you're saying half the water that's going into the Stanford Treatment Center is non-customers, any ballpark at all doing this might save off of that 5%, 10%, if that makes any sense? You know that 400,000, 400 million gallons that are.
You want to know what the benefit is
Yeah,
quantitatively?
I'm sure it's probably tough to.
It is without having to do some of the work already and getting some results back, so there's really no data. I can talk about other towns, but it's not consistent with what we have here. It'd be ballparking, it'd be an estimate.
Yeah, that's all right. I was just trying to kind of rectify.
I mean, it's a question, Rob, like, what do we pay per gallon? So if we eliminate
you said
40 million
3
gallons.
And we're cutting it in
We put
half.
3 million, and we're looking at 820 million gallons that we send over there now.
Mhm.
But we only really use 400,
Half
we're
of
gonna
it's
total
half-
it without the.
Right. yeah, but
I don't
half
think
is-
we'll ever get it all out, but if I had to shoot for a number, I'm looking for the first investment to maybe knock out close to 100.
Yeah,
I'd like to see
25%.
that, knowing that we're going after the big fish, if you will,
Yeah.
that we see.
Yeah, I'm just curious for a year, 2 years from now, whatever it is, we come back and have to do some more,
Mhm.
kind of what we saw as a reduction of that, and I'm sure it's long-term seepage, you know, like whatever we're losing out.
Sure.
Okay.
At that time, when I do come back for the second phase, I'll have something to present to you as numbers.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, no other questions. We need a motion to approve the bonding resolution for the sanitary sewer system project. Rob, second? Paul? Okay, all in favor? Okay, Dan, you okay with this?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Great, 7-0, great. Okay.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, I appreciate it. All right, next topic is update on review of reserve and recurring appropriation accounts.
I think I'll be the spokesperson. So we've had a couple of meetings. It's been Dan, Taylor, Jim, and Jack Davis from F&B, and come up with a couple of ideas that the group's still working through. Hopefully we'll have something to present to you in the next meeting or so. But the main idea is looking to reduce the number of reserves that we have and establish some criteria that we can bring back to the full board to establish criteria for when we set up a reserve and also how we access the funds in the reserves.
So can you give maybe an overview of just the number and size and volume of accounts and dollar value of the accounts that we're talking about that are caught up in this review?
Sure. Page 12 of the next items backup shows all the accounts that are included in the reserve review. We've kind of been trying to categorize them as like project-specific, recurring appropriations, or true reserves. So if you look at page 12 of the capital non-recurring summary backup, life to date on the budget is $25.4 million. We've expended and encumbered about $22 million, and the available balance among those all those accounts is about $3.4 million. The largest of which is the fire commission apparatus, which is about $1.8 million.
Okay. What preliminary conclusions do you have from the work? What you kind of laid out the objective of fewer of these accounts and kind of criteria from that. Are there any conclusions from that or next steps?
Taylor or Dan, you have a comment on that?
You know, we had some thoughts last time, but we haven't had a chance. The very last meeting was just Dan and I without Jack and Jim. So
Okay.
we'd like to talk with them and see if they feel like they're on the same page with us before we kind of go public with it.
Maybe like it's.
The only thing I think I'd add is that we've been discussing, and it was just the three of us on this last call, incorporating obviously useful life, but also scale, and having a conversation about just an amount below which it doesn't make sense to reserve, and above which we'll have a conversation and adopt a policy.
Okay.
So that's again, that's a preliminary, more of an observation than a conclusion.
Okay, and just to remind the audience of kind of what we're looking at and what problem we're trying to solve. This really has been an issue for a while, not a serious issue, but I think got more visibility over the summer with the budget process. Basically, what we have as a town is quite a number of reserve accounts, and they're funded so that appropriated proceeds are set aside and available to pay for a variety of projects. And there's quite a diversity of these funds. As Jennifer said, the most famous and the largest one of those is our fire apparatus equipment reserve. And so the purpose of that is to say, well, we've got a fire truck that's going to cost $500,000 or $1 million, and we know when that's about going to have to be replaced. Why don't we reserve some money over time so that when it comes time to spend that money to replace that truck, we've got the money appropriated and it's ready to go. The idea is that it eliminates sort of spikes, if you will, in taxpayer demands when the replacement of those types of assets come up. These reserve accounts have proliferated so that we've got a lot of them for lots of different topics, and as Jennifer said, they total up quite a bit of money, and we can see the amount of money in those accounts that's not spent. So the idea here, as she said, is to take a look at the number of reserve accounts and why we have them and where they are currently, close them out if it makes sense, which F&B did a few of those as part of their budget process this year in the summer and spring, and then establish criteria for why we would establish these accounts going forward. I think there's something to consider. One of the ones that, or at least an idea that not controversial, but something that would require some thought before we implement it, is what to do about the fire apparatus reserve. It's a big number. And it's contrary to what we do with a lot of big assets like that in town, in the sense that we borrow money to pay for those, whereas fire apparatus, we actually tax over a period of time and don't spend the money until the equipment needs to be replaced. So lots of thinking, I think, is required to sort through all that. I appreciate you guys taking a look at it, and let's just report on that periodically as your work advances. And then I guess when we get to a series of recommendations, I don't know what collaboration is required with the Board of Selectmen, or ultimately even the RTM, but I think having everybody at the table and having reviews of this work as it progresses is a good idea. Is there anything to add to the work that's been done so far as an update, or is that pretty much it?
I think maybe just say one of the areas that we looked at were what were being spent and when things were being spent in some of these funds.
Yep.
It's like, I think the fire truck reserve is a good example of when we put money in, we generally know what that's gonna look like when that is purchased every 10 or 15 years. It's gonna be big, red, have 3 axles and carry water. There are some other ones where we put smaller amounts in every single year, just in terms of to fund a sort of more generalized description of renovation or maintenance. But we were looking for what it was ultimately spent on. It was ultimately spent on sort of larger items, whereas in a normal capital process, we would all, look at the leaf blower, look at the pickup truck, look at other things and consider them. Those were the things I think we were considering to say, well, is that something that should be just funded under sort of general appropriations or for a very specific item?
All right, well, I think this is timely. Frank?
No, I was just gonna say, one of the things I think we ought to keep focused on is interest rates, both on the income side and on the borrowing side, and inflation. Just to be conscious, in some years, it may cost us more to save than it would to borrow, so we just ought to keep that in mind.
Yeah, we certainly don't need negative interest rates on monies we've set aside to pay for things in the future. I don't want that. I agree.
Yeah.
Good. Anything else on that?
No.
Okay, terrific. Review and close out our RFCNRE capital accounts. Jennifer?
Okay, on page 1, there's a summary of what we currently have open. The items that I wanted to focus on are specific projects to close, projects to carry over, and the idle projects to carry over. So on pages 2 to 6 are projects that are complete and can be closed out to the tune of $369,904 moving into the Board of Finance reserve. So that would put your reserve at just under $830,000 for you to determine how you want to use that in the future.
I'm sorry, can you just, so everybody can hear it, review the criteria that we're using for all this, right? So these are accounts that are ready to be closed out, but there's accounts that have been kind of dormant, so what are the rules for that?
Right, so these are all ones that the departments have said, we're done. Project's complete, there may have been funds left over, in a couple there were small deficits, they went over slightly, but it's offset by surpluses elsewhere. So overall, on all of those accounts, we used 89.97% of what was budgeted, and the $369,000 remain. The other piece of that is starting on page 7, projects to carry over. They're active projects, but the departments are saying we need more time. So these total just about 2.9 budgeted. They've used just under 1.7 million, so about 58.34% of the budget. And these are still ongoing projects. They've been active. They're works in progress. So the departments are requesting that these be allowed to stay open so that they can continue working on them.
And all those reasons seemed reasonable?
They did.
Okay.
Then on page 10 and 11, these are our idle projects. So we use the criteria of no activity for 18 months or more. So we look at this twice a year. These have a total budget of $348,000. Altogether, we have spent $727. But some of them, they are delayed due to COVID. There's a couple that were delayed due to COVID. Some, they have lingered, but the departments do have plans for them. I think the largest one we have on here is the Town Hall Gymnasium upgrades. That's the only one that's had money spent, the $727. And DPW is planning major window replacements, and you authorize $75,000 in your bonding package as part of the budget process. So that project is moving forward. It hasn't gotten off the ground yet, but it is moving forward.
Can you remind me which accounts the F&B closed out, sort of preempting this process? Are any of those still open or have balances, or do you remember what they did?
What F&B looked at were idle funds. They
Okay.
were outside of the capital non-recurring fund. They were
Well, they were
former
separate from
donation
this.
funds and
Fine.
special purpose funds that
Okay.
were idle.
So speaking of which, are there any of those types of funds that need to be reviewed as part of this process? Because if I think about reserves, I mean, you could have a reserve for a capital asset, but you could have reserves for non-capital expenditures, which I think is what their focus was.
Right, we still have a couple of old funds. We have the special education fund, which has about $100,000. The land purchase fund, which I think is about $30,000. And I feel like there's one other, but I'm drawing a blank. So we need to decide if we want to just close those out. They become part of the regular fund balance, and if a need arises, there would be an appropriation. But other than that, those are really all that's left.
Just those two? Okay. Questions, comments?
Janet, the specific projects to close, the first line item here, so that was a process where the department said it was okay to close those out? Is that right?
Yes,
Would it be fair to say that these are the kinds of projects where we'd like to establish some kind of procedure for closing them out, rather than waiting in some cases for a long time before a department head says to go ahead?
these typically close out within 1 to 2 years. It's really the ones that are on page 12 that have had appropriations over multiple years and have balances build up over multiple years. But this first set, the specific projects to close out, they're really for a specific purchase. We're gonna buy a speed control sign. And they buy it, and that's it, it's done within the year, or if there was a delay, within 2 years. So I think that these are, closeout purposes, these are handled pretty well. I do have some concerns on where budgets were substantially off. There were a few where they spent 50% or less, I believe. So I think that we could tighten up the budgeting on these a little bit, but I think the closeout works well.
Hey, Jen,
Again, I was reacting to the first item on page 2, where the last activity was 11 years ago.
So that particular one is a little bit different. That was a reserve that was established decades ago. And nothing's been going on with it, so we just need to close it out. So that one, I guess, shouldn't have been categorized as a specific project. It should have been its own. It's a reserve to close.
Hey, Jen, if I could, one, I think this report is great, and I think maybe like to Dan's point, I wouldn't mind if, depending on how automated this is, we actually looked at this like every 6 months, or certainly every year. But if I can make 2 recommendations just for this report. One, it would be great if we could add a column that says when the project was approved, and whether it was sort of an off-cycle, like of the date, or maybe when the budget is approved in May. So if we could add a column in there. And then if you could maybe take these, I think it just might be helpful as I kind of look through these, and if you break them up between Board of Selectmen projects, Board of Ed projects, and if it makes sense, sewer projects. I'm not sure if
There are no sewer projects
Okay.
in here. It'd be just Board of Selectmen and Board of Ed.
Because I think seeing the start date, and I'm just looking through some of these, I think if we know when it started and it hasn't been around, I think maybe we can proactively kind of go back to, I was just looking at, for instance, on these special projects that we're gonna carry over, like the district, I remember like the wiring for the air conditioning that we need to kind of do right away so they could wire all those air conditioning units. It seems like, I think that was like 3 years ago.
I think it was 2, but
2 years ago, and I think there's like 50,000 left over, and they're saying there's a few rooms that they still are looking to wire. So if we, I think it'd just be good if we could keep how long that money has been sitting in there.
we can do that. I think we may even have a column and it's just hidden because we haven't shown it to you before, so it's easy enough to add in there.
But otherwise, I think it's a great way to look at it, kind of similar to the way we look at bonded projects.
Yeah. Good. Other questions, comments? Okay, I guess my only, no, I think changing the report like that makes good sense, and this is a good cleanup effort to stay on top of these accounts and make sure they're being used for what they were proposed, so. All right, do we need a vote to close these out?
Yes.
Okay. Could I get a motion to close out the accounts we are closing out? And so as a reminder, this is on page
2 to 6.
Yeah, this is on page 6, right?
Yep.
So the total amount to be closed out to the Board of Finance capital reserve is $369,904.82 from the closeout of these reserve accounts. Could I get a motion to do that? Jim, Paul? Jim, second, Paul. All in favor? Okay, Jim, you okay with this?
Aye.
Okay, 7-0, great. All right. Next topic is transfers.
The first one, the Darien Fire Department motorized equipment repair, that actually was either pulled or tabled from last night's Board of Selectmen agenda, so I would ask that we table that and bring it up after they have approved it.
Okay, we can do that. Next one's emergency management program expenses.
This was a bit of a catch-all for our COVID expenses that weren't really department-specific, but were more overarching and town-wide, so we put them into emergency management, which made his budget go over. So he's able to cover most of it internally, but he does need $7,000 from contingency.
So, sorry, so this was the program expenses, the $15,907, or?
Yes.
Okay. Any sense of what these general COVID expenses are?
Some of the larger ones were the tent rental, monthly tent rental for the testing site. I think that was close to $3,000 a month.
Okay. Any questions on this one?
Is that the Board of Finance contingency?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, seems fine to me. I'll have more comments about COVID at the end of the meeting, but a motion to approve this transfer. Jim, second. Rob? All in favor? Okay, Dan, you okay with that?
Aye. Aye.
Okay, that transfer is approved. Next one is EMS paramedic services, $7,960.
Yes, our contract with Stanford for paramedic services requires us to pay $425,000 a year. Most of that is what they collect through billing for paramedic services goes to Stanford, and then the town has to pay the difference. So we budgeted $70,000 in fiscal '20. Our total that we had to pay them was just under $78,000, so we are requesting a transfer of $7,960.
So a big improvement.
Yes, big improvement from last year.
Okay, and was the improvement just better collections, or was there some magic to this, or what?
It really was better collections. They had switched their billing agency probably a year and a half or 2 years ago, and so fiscal '19 felt the effect of that as that new billing and collection system was really getting up and running. But now it seems that they have caught up. They have a very good process in place,
That's great.
and we're in a much better position.
Okay, questions on this?
I would just say, I think it's amazing. I feel like if we could roll it back a few years, the incremental cost to really add this service has been pretty small to the town.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
I mean, it's,
no, that's great. Okay, motion to approve. Taylor, second. Rob? All in favor? Dan, you good with this?
Aye.
Okay, 7-0. Next up is DPW motorized equipment repair at $5,879.
Right, they had some expensive repair costs in order to be in compliance with state mandated exhaust systems on their larger plow trucks. So they are requesting a transfer of $5,879.
I would have thought the tree maintenance account will be depleted after all these storms, but I'm glad to see there's a
This was
few
fiscal 20, it was
shekels.
before the tropical storm.
Okay.
That's tree maintenance, not tree.
Oh, not-
This is fiscal 20.
Fair point. Motion
Very
to-
different time.
Motion to approve. Okay, Jim, Frank, second, all in favor? Dan, you good?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Next up, DPW heating fuel, $6,867.
They had additional heating demand in their truck bays that are controlled by fresh air sensors. And the sensors were requiring additional balancing. These adjustments are being made, but as a result of what was going on with the system, they did use more heating fuel than anticipated and are requesting a transfer of $6,867.
Seems like they would have known this before July, but
So we had a little discussion at our department head meeting this morning. We were a little bit lenient at the end of fiscal 20 regarding transfers with so much going on and not quite knowing what expenses were going to come through for COVID and where things stood, and just overall, we were a bit more lenient on transfers than we
Got
should
it.
have been. So that is going to change in fiscal 21.
okay, motion to approve. Okay, Taylor, Jim, second. All in favor? Dan?
Aye.
Okay. Next one, DPW overtime, $5,583.
This one is directly related to COVID and staffing at the transfer station. They had to do alternate weekly staffing of the actual transfer station personnel, but then they also had traffic control to address social distancing. So this is a request to clear up a deficit of $5,583.
Fine with that. Motion to approve. Paul, second. Rob. All in favor? Dan, you're good?
Aye.
Okay. All right, next one, employee benefits for unemployment, $21,672.
Yes, we had a significant overage in our unemployment, and it was primarily due to the separation and unemployment claims arising from 2 employees who separated from service, and we had a minimal impact from COVID-19 in fiscal 20. We are seeing a very significant impact from COVID in fiscal 21. Our July and August bills reflect our change in pay status for part-timers and the lack of some programming.
Okay, so the nature of this is that the town pays unemployment compensation directly. It's not through an insurance fund or?
Right, we are self-insured for unemployment.
Got it.
So the
Okay.
state pays them and then the state bills us.
Okay, and so these employees were terminated or they resigned?
I know one was terminated. I'm not certain the circumstances of the other.
Okay, would they be collecting unemployment had they resigned and not been terminated?
There are many circumstances under which we have to pay unemployment, including even seasonal employees like crossing guards who know that their position is seasonal.
Okay. Very good. Any questions on this? Motion to approve. Paul and Jim for second. All in favor? Paul, or Dan, you okay with this?
Aye.
Okay. All right, last one from this group is Health Department, seasonal and temporary, $8,243.
And this one is also directly related to COVID-19. The health department hired a part-time a temporary public health nurse to do contact tracing and some interviews. And it was of an emergency nature. They did not have it in the budget, but they are able to transfer from their part-time salaries to cover it. And they are eligible for a local health district grant, and this will be reimbursed through that.
Great, okay. Motion to approve. Taylor and second Rob. All in favor? Dan?
Aye.
Okay. All right, that's it for this section. Next up is transfers for fiscal 21. First one is Fire Commission.
So this one you saw in July and decided to hold off on making a decision pending some discussion, reaching back to F&B, because they had cut this out of the budget.
So I think, Dan, you and Frank, we're going to have some discussions with the RTM about this to make sure they're okay with this. It's not that we're not within our authority to make the transfer. It doesn't require a further RTM decision for an appropriation to do this. But in the spirit of Senator McLaughlin would say comedy, it struck me that we ought to do that, and you guys were pretty strong on that. What'd you find? What do you think? Francis?
I'll go first. Go ahead, Dan.
Go ahead, Frank.
Go, Francis.
Oh, okay. Well, I think both Dan and I had separate conversations with Jack, and I think we came away with the view that we should proceed unless we've heard something quite dissenting by now. So we should go ahead and proceed.
Okay, all right, that sounds reasonable. Dan, any further?
My recollection was Seth was also contacted, and as you mentioned, John, my concern was more that they were made aware of this rather than, and they were made aware of it and voiced no objection. So check mark from my end.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you guys looking into it. This is something that was controversial at the time that the RTM and the F&B took this out, and again, whereas we're within our authority to restore it using the mechanism that Jennifer has specified here, just in the spirit of collaboration, I wanted to make sure we reached out to those folks, and you guys were quite right to bring that up at the last meeting, and so I appreciate you doing that. We've gotten to a good decision in two ways. One is we'll get the drill tower that we need, but two, we've collaborated with and consulted our other town officials to bring this to a conclusion. So, okay, so
John, do we know, did the RTM, like the financial, but did they have a meeting between when this was proposed and
don't know.
Cincinnati, do we know? Or?
I don't believe so.
been a long time.
They had a July meeting, but I
Right, but
don't,
they didn't have, I don't,
this was
think
not
they
on the
had
agenda
August.
for that. And in fact, what I thought was we had picked this up in July, and they were not gonna meet again until September, in which case you guys said, look, I'd really like to go talk to them. So I
Yeah,
think
and
that was the
Jack-
genesis of this.
Jack was copacetic himself, and he was going to touch base and let us know if there were problems. So
Okay,
Okay.
whether there was a meeting for it, I don't.
okay.
Okay, so the transfers to take this out of the 35 Leroy basement design, which looks like is no longer possible.
correct.
Okay. Like never possible, or just not currently possible?
I believe the consultant, or I think they put it out for an RFP, and what they got back just was not workable at all.
Okay. All right, then, very good. No other questions?
Just a procedure question, like, was this originally a Board of Ed project? The 35
No.
Leroy? That was a
No,
town?
35 Leroy was town project.
The
Perfect, okay.
basement was, yeah.
Okay. Okay, motion to approve the drill tower fence transfer. Jim, second. Rob? All in favor? Dan, you're okay with this?
Aye.
Okay, great. All right, then the other one for fiscal '21 is police training services for $15,900.
Right, this is really just a cleanup. When the police department created their budget for fiscal '29, they included in the overtime account some items that should have actually been in the training account. So they are requesting to move that amount to the proper account so that they can do their
So
training.
not an expenditure change, just a budgeting problem?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Motion to approve. Paul, second. Taylor? Okay, all in favor? Okay, Dan, you're okay with this?
Aye.
Okay, that concludes all of our transfers. Next one is review of fiscal year 2020 administrative transfers. Jennifer?
So these are all the ones that you have given authority to myself or to Kate and me to approve. And just a summary for the year, this is for your information only. You do not have to approve anything because Kate and I have already done this. In fiscal '20, we had 153 transfers, and they totaled $222,540. But there were 3 that Kate and I approved that were really just classification changes. There was about $38,000 in Park and Rec, where the state changed how their positions are classified between temporary and part-time, so we just needed to move the budget to the right place. The senior center, when we put the budget together, there was money put into full-time for a new chef position. It should have been in part-time. And then in the police department, holiday pay was included in full-time salary, and we moved it out. So when we back those out, it's really 150 transfers totaling $129,524.
These all seem pretty reasonable. How is that process working? I mean, we kind of ask that question every year in terms of how you're getting it done, the approval authorities, the criteria specifying what you can and can't approve.
It works
that
very
sort of
well.
thing. That's
I
fine.
think the dollar amount is right. I think the fact that you gave us the approval to transfer, regardless of dollar amount, like to like within a department, so between police overtime accounts, depending on which division it's in, we can transfer that. That has been very helpful.
Okay.
Jen, can I mention a dollar amount again? What are we?
I am up to $500. Kate and I are up to $5,000. And it's only intra-departmental.
Yeah,
Within the department.
Yeah,
We
not
can't cross
between
departments.
departments. And then what's the rule for personnel expenditures?
Personnel is if it's new personnel, regardless of dollar amount, it will come to you if it's any change in headcount or hours. If it's just, like I said, the position classification change from full-time to from part-time to temporary, we consider that really like to like.
So after you threw out the 3 transfers, I think you called them, we're down to 150 for 120,000, so less than, they're about 800 each roughly.
It was about
average.
864 per, and that compares to last year where we had 126 for $145,000. So there are more of them, but they were smaller this year.
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay, terrific. We don't need to vote on this. This is just. Okay.
Just informational.
Okay, any other questions on administrative transfers? Okay, financial report, Kate.
Fiscal 20 preliminary results. What I provided to you are unaudited results for our revenues and expenditures. On the revenue side, we were lower than budget by $2,343,000, but a big part of that is the $2.175 that we plan to draw from fund balance to fund the redemption of the bonds. We did not actually end up having to use that, which is nice. So that's really not an unfavorable variance because we never actually book on the revenue side the transfer from fund balance. It just flows through. But big numbers, property tax. A lot of the favorability there is because of our lower budgeted collection rate. Licenses and permits, the unfavorability is mostly due to the building department and the timing of their redevelopment projects. That's been a consistent issue for the last couple of years. And charges for services, that was really for COVID impact. So park and rec program fees, youth commission fees, and senior center, their programming was disrupted in the spring. So they did not realize revenue for those programs. On the expenditure side, we ended up 2.9 million better than budget. Biggest number there is the Board of Ed at $723,000 favorable variance. And the other big one is in overhead and miscellaneous. We did not use much of our contingency. We budgeted $400,000 and we have $372,000 remaining. That'll come down a little bit after those transfers that you just approved, but we had a lot of contingency remaining. And also in there, we had a significant surplus in our medical because of vacancies. And in the 21 budget, we reevaluated how we budget for new positions and vacancies, what assumptions we make regarding medical insurance. So that's expected to be lower in the future. One question that has been asked before is on Board of Ed ECR. They budgeted $2,851,000. Their actual was $2,566,000. What they submitted to the state was $3,619,000, so they got a reimbursement of roughly 70.9%.
That's probably the lowest I can remember. That sound about right?
Yeah.
Usually we're in the high 70s So 70.9.
70.89 is the specific. So overall, what the revenue and expenditures mean for us is we're gonna add about $600,000 to our fund balance at the end of fiscal '20, which will put us at 17.52% of the fiscal '21 budget, and the dollars in excess of our 12% minimum is $8,149,000.
Yeah, I guess I'd point out a couple of things. One is, we had planned a fund balance drawdown of $2,175,000 and didn't have to do that. So even though the surplus is, as a technical matter, $570,000, it's actually better than we anticipated, simply
Yes.
because we didn't draw down fund balance like we thought we would. And then I would just point out on the expenditure side, it really is remarkable to go down the list, and there's not a single one of them that's an unfavorable balance. That I think reflects that real discipline, not just by the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Education, but actually by the individuals who run those departments, right? So when we come in and do these budgets, which I think through our process they're pretty tight, and to see that even in a year when you started at the beginning of at the end of that fiscal year, having COVID-related expenditures or certainly uncertainties associated with that, to see coming out of the fiscal year that still we've got favorable balances, favorable variances in all these departments is a remarkable testament to, I think, the quality of town government that's, you know, with the people who run these budgets as well as the budget process itself. So I think that's terrific. Other comments on the fiscal '20 results? Jim?
Yeah, I was just looking at, I think a lot of the expenditure savings, if you look, just looking through the notes, there's a bunch of dollars in there. It looks like there was a program that just never happened because of COVID.
Yes.
And then just on the Board of Ed, the 723, that's great. Is that net of the items that they pre-purchased?
Yes.
Okay.
I will say that's preliminary, and I received an email from our auditor today saying that their books are $154,000 different from ours.
Yeah, that was 5 something.
Yeah, so we balance to what they reconciled to us, so I'm not quite sure what that 154 is. So that 723 may not be accurate. And that's why it says unaudited at the top.
Other questions? And the only thing I would point out, just at the bottom of that page 1, you'll see that we have a fund balance of $25,854,000. Again, when these numbers sort of finally sort out, but if you look at that number versus our 12% of budgeted town revenues floor, that suggests that we've got a little over $8 million sitting in fund balance as a reserve. And so if we look at these uncertain times where we've got some of these expenditures, which we'll be talking about over the course of the fall, it's good to know that we have that number there. So that's, I think, pretty good news for the town. Okay, if no other questions on fiscal '20, fiscal '21 year to date.
Fiscal '21 year to date, the main item I wanted to highlight is the tax collector. On your report, we didn't have August tied out yet, so it doesn't include August, but it does show our July collections, which are our big collection period. But what I wanted to let you know is the tax collector has contacted all of the people who deferred their taxes. And about 85% of them plan to pay by October 1st. So I think fears that we had, hopefully, are not going to come to fruition, and the number of people who requested the deferral was significantly less than what we thought might happen.
Okay.
And that 15%, Jen, equals roughly how much do we know? Probably not a whole lot.
It's not much.
Less than 20?
I think it was less than $1 million that was deferred.
Right. So,
And that's $1 million of just like the first installment, right?
Right. And then if they do not pay by October 1st, I think it's a 6% interest.
Right.
And it's still only the portion of the population that doesn't have a mortgage, right?
Right, because if it was escrowed, it was paid.
Do we have any insight? I haven't looked at all, like, into delinquencies with mortgages or no? Like, do we expect any other shoe to drop after the 6 months has kind of run out?
I don't believe so. We can definitely keep in touch with Kathy on that and see if she sees any kind of bad trends or is hearing any rumblings, but I think the July collection period went really well. Granted, for those who escrow their taxes, a large part of that was escrowed before COVID hit. But I think if July is an indication, I think our January collection period will be good as well.
Okay, still early days in the fiscal year, so we'll have,
One other, actually two items that I wanted to let you know about. Tropical Storm Isaias. We are working with FEMA on a reimbursement claim with them. So far, what we saw for overtime was about $17,800 on the storm, and estimates for debris removal and other expenditures were only about $13,000. I haven't seen all the invoices come through, so despite what it looked like around here, it seems that the town did not incur that significant of expenses.
that's great.
And then the only other item I wanted to call your attention to is actually related to the ECR discussion. On page 5, the intergovernmental revenues. Educational cost sharing, every year, educational cost sharing is the place where ECR gets trued up from the prior year. So in fiscal '20, we actually got $100,000 more of ECS money as part of the adjustment for truing up ECR. I have been informed by the Board of Education that they are expecting that we could see in excess of $200,000 downward adjustment on ECS, because they filed ECR before COVID. Believe that normally the April filing, May.
Well, they file in March, could be in May.
Yeah, so there was something related to the timing of the filing and then what they actually spent and COVID related. So they are expecting that we are going to see a downward adjustment on ECR because of the prior year, or a downward adjustment on ECS because of the prior year ECR.
So Jen, can I ask a question? Does that mean that, you know, the 70% that we talked about, does that mean that the amount that we submitted should have been lower?
I don't know.
Or does that mean that the amount that we received was just higher than expected?
That I don't know.
Because it might be helpful as we kind of think through that to make sure that we're doing sort of adjusting the actual percentage that we all talk about and analyze during budget season for whatever plus or minus occurs through the ECS true-up. Because I feel like that's probably the right way to
Yeah, I think that's
think
right.
about it.
Well, because unless we have that historical perspective, we can't really evaluate. Yeah, I would agree.
Maybe you could work with like Rich as we figure this out, just to, we could implement that in the way we
I like
look at
that.
it. It's probably
That's a great idea. Okay, COVID expenditures and reimbursement year to date.
So this has been a work in progress. Where we stand right now is we have submitted one claim to FEMA on May 22nd, and we have gotten a decision on that. They have stated that they have awarded us $60,139 on a claim of, they accepted $80,206 in our claim. So we should be seeing that $60,000 soon. The remaining $20,000 is eligible to be submitted to the state Corona relief funds, and that submission is due currently by September 30th. We cannot submit anything that has not already gotten a FEMA decision to the state Corona relief funds. So emergency management, working through Tropical Storm Isaias and FEMA timing, is finalizing our second FEMA claim on COVID that will take us through June 30th, but we will not have a decision on that before September 30th. The state knows that a lot of towns are just now or have recently gotten in their final FEMA claims to get through June 30th, and most of them are not going to have a decision by September 30th. So the state is in constant contact with FEMA regarding timing, and they said that they will let us know if they adjust the deadline again. But where we stand right now is a submission of $26,227.36 when I just finalized it today. And that's out of our maximum allotment of $40,282. So if they do extend it and we can get the additional FEMA claim in and a final award on that, we'll have additional funds that we can reimburse through the CRF.
So when it says expenditures there, $489,804, these are just expenditures that have been identified as being eligible for some kind of grant.
These are just expenditures that were identified as we only spent those dollars because of COVID. And then there are various grant programs that they may be eligible under. So the Secretary of State had a program, the Health Department used their preparedness grant. Those were two small ones, a little over $5,000 each. The school had some federal funds for $134,000. What is not covered in that is then can be submitted to FEMA. All of it may not be eligible under FEMA, but it can be submitted to FEMA. And then based on FEMA's decision, it would be eligible for the CRF reimbursement.
Okay, and this is just through the last fiscal year. That doesn't account
Yes.
anything that's going on now.
Right.
And is there a separate accounting for expenditures since July 1st for all the same set of grants?
Yeah, well, same set of grants, no. Right now, all we know of is the FEMA claim period is set to expire December 31st. So we should be able to submit to FEMA. But based on the duration of the claim period, there's some changes that are occurring after, I think it's after 6 months that the claim period's open. And then the state CRF money, they have signaled that there will be more funds for July 1st forward, but we don't know what those allocations are yet.
Got it.
On the town side, we do know that for fiscal '21, we've spent $16,214, and it's primarily on cleaning supplies, and beach security.
Okay. All right, other points, anything else on financial reports?
I just have a question, in terms of the grants when they come in.
Award, under footnote 5, it says we were awarded $60,000. Did we actually receive that payment, or is that payment still due?
It is still due. We received the award letter last week or the week before, so we should see the payment very soon.
Thank you.
Jim?
Yeah, when we receive the grants, where do they come into? Do we put them back into specific accounts where the expense was incurred, or are they going back into the general fund?
They will go into the general fund. All of these, because they occurred in the prior year, we can't put them back into the accounts because they have new appropriations for the new year. So they'll go into a grants revenue account in the general fund. The Board of Ed, the $134,000, we passed directly to them. That was, I think, one of the stipulations of that funding was that it was to go to the Board of Ed. If we receive any funds in the current fiscal year, technically they would be viewed as reimbursement and we could credit it back to the expense accounts, but I would prefer to just put it in a grants revenue and use that to offset any overages we might experience in the expenditure accounts.
Okay. Other questions on the financial report? Okay, next up is minutes, but we're going to table those. They're not
Yes,
ready,
please.
correct? Okay, so we'll.
So when it goes back to the general fund, how's it, does it go in the contingency?
No, it will just be one of our revenues. It would actually get classified as an intergovernmental revenue, miscellaneous grant kind of thing. And so at the end of the year, we'll have additional funds that we hadn't budgeted there.
But it comes in unassigned, right, and unrestricted?
Yes. Yeah, if we wanted to, we could bring it before you and say we received $60,000 of FEMA funds and we would like to appropriate it for such and such purpose. But I don't think we're in a position where we need to do that, so I think it makes more sense to just put it on the revenue side and let it flow through to fund balance at the end of the year.
And all these grants are being tracked separately, so that's probably okay. I think that's right. So that's a good question, actually. Okay, so we will not do minutes. Let's do special assignments and committee reports. What do we have on the list? We have audit. Where do we stand on that?
We've been doing the audit remotely, which has been interesting. A lot of scanning. I think it's going well. They started a little earlier than usual, but I think we were in a very good position. We can expect to have an audit report probably mid-November. If they're able to stay on their calendar as well as me stay on track with a few items, but no surprises so far. I think everything's gone very well.
Okay.
0 days on premise now?
They were here last Wednesday just to look at bank recs, bank statements, and some tax collector stuff that was just too much to scan.
Just, I was just gonna say, those are kind of things, yeah. They're oblong.
Yeah, so they came in and looked at those in person.
Good to hear.
Okay, any other committee reports, other activities anybody's working on? Okay. All right. Chairman's report. The only thing I had to mention on that was that I spoke with Tara and with Alan about their COVID-related expenditures. This has been discussed at the Board of Ed, and there's a variety of committees and others that are focused on all of this and information that's going around. I invited them to come to the Board of Finance to present the latest and just give us a chance to hear from them. So they couldn't come tonight. They've got another meeting coming up where they're going to go through some of that with the Board of Ed. But they're going to come to our meeting, our next meeting, which is Tuesday, October 20th. So we'll have a chance to hear from Alan and perhaps Tara in person to go through where they are to date and what they've spent and what they're anticipating going forward. So we'll have a good in-person sense of that and have a chance to ask questions. One thing, and Jim and I were communicating about this earlier, it's probably a good idea is that if we can really prepare some questions in advance and send them to them so that they can think about them and come to the meeting on the 20th with some answers. One thing that'll help us in that regard is that they sent me a link that goes to some of the reports that they have already developed on this or that are in the process of being developed. So I'll make sure that all that gets sent around to everybody on this board. I would encourage all of you to read through it. I'll do the same. And let's think what questions we might have on some of that and send that to Alan and to Tara so that they can ponder and have some answers for us when they come on the 20th. That'll just make that session more efficient. One thing I'd also suggest that we do is we have a similar report from the Board of Selectmen and sort of how they see things on the town side. So Jennifer, I don't know if you can mention that to Kate. Maybe we can, maybe I can talk to Jamie, see what she thinks, but if somebody could come by, or maybe that's just you, and just give us a similar overview of what we've spent to date for both overall and for the current fiscal year, and how does the view forward look in terms of additional expenditures? Is this enough? Are we going to have to spend a lot more? What do people see at this point? It strikes me that as long as this pandemic's going on, we probably ought to have a report like this at least every 90 days just to get a sense for things. But that'll give us an opportunity both to understand what's going on and ask questions, and information to put in the back of our minds as to how all this might ultimately impact the fiscal year in total. So that's my sense. Any questions on any of that?
Do we have a light agenda in October? Like, should we invite the Board of Selectmen to give us a similar?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh,
I mean,
sorry,
it could be just Jennifer if it's simple and straightforward, but if it's something that we want to do more broadly, we could certainly invite them to come. I'm mindful of social distancing and all that, so we got to be careful with all that. The other thing we might do is maybe get a sense for expenditures to date to send that around to this board in advance, so if you guys want to ask questions or pose them between now and the 20th, maybe those questions could be answered by the time we get here on the 20th. So,
Yeah, sorry, Jim, I was just gonna say, the more stuff we can see ahead of time, and the links that you're talking about, John, the better off we are in terms of
yeah,
formulating.
just make that session more efficient and maybe more informative for us. I think that's
John,
right.
I think it's the next Monday or Tuesday, it's on their website, the Finance Subcommittee of the Board of Ed
Right.
has a meeting. It's usually in the morning, but it's always like Vimeoed, and I think Rich does like a very good job of putting together a now fairly consistent kind of month or every 6-week type update on it, and so reading through that report and listening to that, I think,
It's helpful. He's good.
yeah, I think if you have good questions, you either get them answered there, or like that should spur, more questions. So it's worthwhile listening and reading that.
That's great. Anyway, I think the link should have a lot of the stuff that he's doing, and Jim's right, these are quality reports. So if you have a chance to look through some of that, or even look at the tapes, that would be good too. That's all I had out of my report. Does anybody ever have any other business or other questions? Anything to bring up? Okay. Next meeting is October 20th, and like I said, we'll get these items on the agenda and move forward with some of the other things we've talked about, the minutes, but also the reserve account discussion that's going on right now. Okay, I think that's it. Motion to adjourn. Okay, Rob, Taylor, second. All in favor? Dan, do you want to continue the meeting, or are you ready to adjourn?
Overruled.
Good night, good luck.
All right, thanks, everybody. We're adjourned. Thank you, Dan.